here's an example, okay? It's famous spacetime, okay? And you have two versions of spacetime. You have the ridiculous 2D spacetime and the ridiculous 3D spacetime. And you can see that one is sitting on top of spacetime. The other one is drawing spacetime towards its center. In this case, the Earth, right? And the question is, these two cannot both be right. And so these people put these things out there and they get thousands of hits and people say, ooh, and ah, and oh, that's so great, that's so fantastic. And they don't even know what they're staring at. They don't even know if this matches in any way, what Einstein said. And it turns out that they don't, because Einstein, first of all, said that, you can only apply relativity out there. And a lot of these folks don't know it. There's this fellow who goes out there and says that he's going to prove warp space in his basement. And he goes in there and he does the Cavendish experiment in his basement. He says, oh, I proved that, let me put this out of here for a second. And I proved warp space in my basement. No, you can't. Space-time doesn't work down here. I can't explain using Einstein's equations, okay? I cannot explain why this pen drops to the table. I cannot explain it with I cannot apply Einstein's equation to here. You can only apply Einstein's equation with big masses out there in the global universe. You cannot say that space is so warped here that this falls at that rate. That's why it's falling. Okay, and so again, these people have these notions. Let me get it back up here now. Okay, and one guy says 3D spacetime. No, that's not what Einstein said. So this guy thinks he's very smart because he said, oh, I figured out how spacetime really works. No, spacetime works like the one on the left. For otherwise, Mercury's orbit, which is up there in the center, wouldn't work. Mercury's orbit, the one Einstein applied his theory to, works like the 2D spacetime, the ridiculous 2D spacetime on the left, the two-dimensional one. Okay, so which one should you choose? Should you go with the one on the right, which is a totally different mechanism than the one on the left? That's the million-dollar question. Well, I'm a guy who believes in authority and in democracy, people who vote majority rule. Everybody votes for flat Earth. I'll be a flat earther then, okay? I got to be a flat earther because majority rules, right? And so I'm going to go with the head honchos of mathematical physics. And here we have one. His name is Brian Greene. And this is his version, which is the one on the left that you just saw, okay? That's his version of why the moon doesn't fly out of the solar system. Very straightforward, okay? We have a depression, this surrealistic depression, a two-dimensional cross-section of space-time, I guess. And the moon doesn't fly away because it is trapped within that depression, like a little ball rolling around a roulette. Okay, so I don't know what part you didn't understand there because it's very straightforward. It's illustrated, and Brian Greene, he's a PhD, right? Celebrity, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so he should know. Okay, so you got to follow him because he's, he knows his stuff. He's done all that math. He should know whether the Earth or the moon rolls around, a depression caused by the Earth, or whether it's being pointed towards the center of the Earth and to the center of the moon and to the center of the sun. Which way does the space-time gravity work? Okay, so you got to figure out which of the two. Those two can't be both right. Okay, and just to rub it in, I'm going to go also with another source, which is also authoritative. Okay, so here it is. That's NASA. NASA also has the Earth weighing down the canvas, not the canvas being dragged into the center of the Earth. Okay, so we have to go with this version of gravity according to Einstein, according to the folks in NASA and all the PhDs out there, right, who do mathematical physics. We have to go with their version and not to the people who think they invented something new by by drawing the fishnet inside the Earth. Okay, so what is the mechanism? Why doesn't the Earth fly out of the solar system? Why doesn't the moon fly out of the Earth orbit? Okay, what's keeping it there? And here we have it. Okay, this is what the theory says. The irrational theory of general relativity says. Here it is. Okay, this is the curved wall of time. They say time is a physical object like a wall. The Earth rolls around or slides along this curve, and that's why it doesn't fly out of the solar system. Very, very similar to the analogy of a roulette. You have the little ball going around the roulette. Why doesn't it fly out of there? Because it's got this wall that's preventing the little ball from flying out. And this is no different. Okay, so it's the roulette mechanism. And then what these people say is, when you show them this, you say, well, is this what you're saying? You're saying time is warped. Are you saying there's a canvas there that comes against the skin of the planet? Is our planet rolling or scraping around that depression? Is that why the Earth doesn't fly out? Because that's what they've explained. That's what they illustrated. That's what they told you, objectively. And they said, Bill, you're not supposed to take the analogy literally. And here, this is what they show you. Okay, they show you this little cartoon. They say, understanding gravity, space-time is like a rubber sheet. Massive objects distort the sheet, and wait, they distort it because they're pulled down by what? And the teacher, loses patience, says, space-time is like the set of equations for which any analogy must be an approximation. Wrong. Okay, it's not that, it's an analogy. You have to explain the mechanism of why the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system. If you're going to go in there and say, well, there's a depression and the Earth rolls around it and blah, 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 and then at the end of your class you say, oh, by the way, that was only an analogy. There is no depression. There is nothing coming up against the skin of the Earth. Then what have you said? What is your mechanism? Okay, so this is the issue. These people give you a 2-hour explanation. They show you the pictures. They describe the pictures. They show you the whole works. They explain the mechanism. And you say, okay, I understood it because you see all the objects on the screen or wherever. And then they say, oh, by the way, that depression, that's not there. It's just an analogy. You're not supposed to take it literally. Great. Okay, so here we have the Earth, because, you're saying, okay, but they were able to explain many things with this. Okay, for example, certain orbits and so on with these equations. Not explain them, but really describe them. Okay, and the question is, does the mechanism, that general relativity that Mr. Einstein proposed, is it rational? Can you use this to simulate what's out there? And they say, yeah, it is, because see, we were able to explain, like, and this fellow mentioned that, he says that there's no planet called Vulcan that's close to the sun, somewhere between Mercury and the sun, because they had to try to explain the orbit of Mercury. And Leverrier tried to explain that, and he couldn't. He died. He thought there was a planet there, which was later named Vulcan, because he's the guy who discovered, the Neptune. And so they said, just like he did that math and figured out Neptune, maybe we can figure out, what is it? That there's a little planet there that we can't see very well that's between the Earth and the sun. And he says, thanks to general relativity, we didn't need that planet. We could explain the orbit of Mercury just with equations. And what he doesn't understand, this fellow, and 99% of humanity out there, is that mathematics is tautology. What they do is they make an equation that describes what they're observing. So it better be a tautology if the equation is correct. It's just a tautology. It means that you're making a tailor-made equation so that it fits the observation. And that's what Einstein did with Mercury. He just went in there, put some variables in there. He said, see, if we put it this, and this way, then we can explain the orbit. And what is Einstein's equation for Mercury is that it's a point mass. Okay, to use that terminology, it's a point mass. It describes the motion of a point mass around the sun. That's what Einstein's equation does. That's different than Newton's, which said, look, there's two objects, and they attract according to the inverse square of the distance. Okay, so the notions are different. And in the case of Einstein, it's just a point mass that moves around the sun, and you're describing that path. So it is a tautology. That's why it works, more or less. Maybe there's I think it's not perfect on the money, but it pretty much resembles what Mercury does. That's a description. We still don't know the mechanism. Why doesn't Mercury fly out of the solar system? And that's when they bring in the canvas. Okay, so what's the problem with the canvas? Why is it irrational? Okay, why doesn't it explain? It explains Mercury. Great, I'll concede. It explains Mercury rolling around the sun. What doesn't it explain? Which is 99% of the other stuff. And here is what it does not explain. Okay, here we have the Earth and the Moon rolling around the sun. Okay, so we have the sun weighing down the canvas. Okay, and then around that we have the Earth. It also weighs its little canvas, which is rolling around the other canvas, right? And the Moon has to roll around the canvas that the Earth created. Okay, so far so good. They're both the two canvases, the one for the sun and the Earth, in fact, even for the Moon, they all point downwards. Okay, and we don't know why they point downwards, but we're not going to get into that right now. I just want you to focus on the fact that the fishnets, right, the canvases, okay, they're all parallel. The one for the Earth, the one for the Moon, and the one for the sun, they're all pretty much parallel. They're in the same direction. Okay, what's the problem with this? Well, the problem with this is here. Okay, here you have the Earth on the upper right, and that's correct. They all are parallel with the ecliptic, essentially, right? In other words, the canvas there matches the canvas of the sun. But that doesn't happen with Uranus and its big moon Oberon. Okay, Oberon goes uh, around the equator of Uranus, but Uranus is on its side. Uranus twirls towards the sun. All these are views from the sun, by the way, okay? So you have Oberon, the biggest moon of Uranus, and it's going towards in the direction of the sun over the head of Uranus, which is on its side. In other words, Oberon is running around its equator. The north-south is in the east-west direction. Okay, so Jupiter is on its side, and it has to be pushing the canvas towards the side. I chose one side. It could be towards the other side, but it doesn't matter. It would point east in this case, or it could point west, in order for Oberon to orbit the Uranus the way it does. Okay, so we have a problem because the Earth weighs it downwards, and our moon weighs it downwards because they all are parallel with the sun weighing the canvas downwards. But Oberon and Uranus falsify that. You know, Oberon twirls towards the sun, and so does Uranus. Its north and south pole are sideways. And what happens with Pluto and with Charon, its biggest moon? Well, again, you see there it forms a bullseye pattern as seen from the sun. Okay, so Pluto would have to push the canvas outwards or inwards towards the sun in order for Charon to orbit the way it does, you know, in a bullseye pattern as seen from the sun. So the problem with Einstein's explanation is that it cannot explain these three different mechanisms, you know, with its canvas analogy. You know, how do you explain it with a canvas analogy? If the sun weighs it downwards, why would Uranus push the canvas sidewards, and why would Pluto push it outwards? That's the issue. And here, let me bring this other. Give me a second here. This is a summary of what Einstein's theory is, his explanation, his physical interpretation of how these moons work. Okay, you see the sun weighs the canvas downwards. You can see the white arrows below each one of the suns there. Okay, in the case of the Earth, no problem. Everybody points downwards. In the case of Uranus, it has to push the canvas sidewards in order for Oberon to twirl around the canvas, the roulette mechanism, over the top and towards the sun. And in the case of Pluto, Pluto would have to push it outwards or inwards towards the sun in order for Charon to twirl around in the direction in which it does. So Einstein's theory does not work. His explanation does not work for a three-body system. Okay, and so here they have all these tests of relativity that you'll find out there in the Wikipedia. And they say, oh, these confirm relativity, general relativity. Okay. And maybe they should include, you know, the one is, I mean, there's several. I mean, I'm just pointing to one problem there, which is, you know, in the direction in which the moons orbit. And Einstein cannot explain that with his, you know, with his mechanism, the mechanism that he proposes for gravity. He cannot explain it a three-body system. Okay, so this is the issue. And they should include that. See, they never include that within the failures of general relativity. They say everything's been confirmed. You know, and what are you going to confirm for a black hole? Zero-dimensional nothing? What confirmation do you have there? You know, what proof do you have that there is a zero-dimensional matterless, meaning massless, entity out there that's moving stars around? Dark matter. What have you confirmed about dark matter? That there's this invisible variable that you put in an equation and that you're looking for now in the night sky? Again, all these are failures of general relativity, and nobody mentions that. They just mention stuff that they measure, and they say, oh, we've proven everything. In fact, they put detection of black holes. And they show that ridiculous picture that they published, and they got so many kudos for. Okay, so what's the underlying problem of all this? Well, the underlying problem is that mathematical physics, mathematics, does not use physical objects. And why don't they use objects? Well, because the mathematicians never defined what an object is. They have no use for objects. They only deal with equations, with behaviors, and they don't care about, you know, objects. They do not care about simulating things with objects. And you can see where the problem is. If you go through the literature, any literature, scientific, so-called scientific literature out there, like I do, you know, read papers, and what you will never find, or rarely, I think almost never, is a picture. Here we have physics, which should be a discipline that should be full of pictures. You should have all these pictures showing mechanisms and so on. And you go to these so-called scientific literature, and all you find is equations. You'll never find a picture. Why? Because it's outside of their job descriptions. It's below their pay grade to put pictures in in an article, in a paper. And so this is where the problem is. You know, physics, we say it's causes and mechanisms. The only way you can explain a cause or a mechanism is if you have objects, because you have to simulate it with some kind of object. You got to show us the mechanism. What mechanism are you going to show if you just put an equation? What have you shown? Okay, you haven't shown a mechanism. All you have is a description, a mathematical description of, you know, something you measured. You know, but never an explanation of what caused that to happen. That's the issue. And so no, physics, the language of physics is not mathematics. Okay, if physics has to do with explanations of mechanisms, and if it does, then the language of physics is illustration. You have to illustrate. You have to illustrate the singularity at the beginning of time, Big Bang. You have to illustrate dark matter and show us how it produces this mass that, in other words, how does it keep that star on the outside from going faster? You can't just say there's more mass there, because that's just a description. You haven't told me the mechanism, what causes it to go faster. All you have is a description of the fact that, you know, there's more mass, and according to the equation, it should go faster. That's all you've told me. You haven't told me anything about what is the mechanism. In fact, they use Newtonian law for that, you know, the gravitational law. And Newton said, you know, fingo non hypothesis. In other words, he said, I have no hypothesis, no theory. He had no explanation for how that works. Okay. Okay, so you need objects. You need objects to explain a mechanism. And I'll give you an example here. Okay. I need to explain to you how the steam engine works. You know, a long time ago. Should be straightforward. Okay. And here it is. I illustrate it for you. Okay, so that you can understand the mechanism just by watching the movie. And here it is. Okay. Feed coal into the furnace. Steam pushes the piston upwards. Okay. Introduce cold water and the piston comes downwards. Now, how difficult can that be? Anyone who watches this should say, okay, I understand how the steam engine works. Okay, why it goes up and down, because you have that furnace at the bottom, steam pushes it upwards, cold water pushes it downwards. Okay, straightforward. Did I need any math? Do I need to know how much energy? Do I need to know mass or field or any of those parameters? Do I need to know force? No, I'm just trying to figure out what the mechanism is. And a 10-year-old can tell you what the mechanism is here. You know, heat pushes it up, cold water pushes it down. We're done. See how easy it was? No math, no nothing. That's what we want for gravity. Okay? We want an explanation like this, a baby one that a 10-year-old can understand. What did Einstein say? If you can't explain it to a 10-year-old, you don't know it well enough, or you don't know it at all. Feynman says something similar, or to a barmaid. Okay, so this is the issue. The issue is we want an explanation for what causes the pen to go down. If that's science, we haven't made any progress in the last 2,500 years, and we only proposed irrationalities in the last 200 years. Opposite of what this fellow said. Okay, so here I'm going to show you a little picture which I put in the science series. Okay, and I want you to tell me objectively, okay, what caused the window to break. Okay, see if you can figure it out. I mean, this is difficult. I know for some of you who are not used to seeing images, watching movies, it's very hard on your eyes or whatever. Okay, so here it is. So you have to tell me what caused the window to break. Here it is again, just in case you missed it. Felix revolves it and throws it in. Looks like, I think anyone on the planet would say that a horseshoe went through the window. That's what broke the glass. Okay, was it difficult? One more time, just in case you missed it. Okay. Now, this is what we call objectivity. I should get every person on the planet who is more or less sane, right? and ask them, how did the window break? And the person should say, that window, that specific window. The person should say, you know, a horseshoe went through the window, broke the window. I'm not asking them anything about mass and force and energy, whether he ate an ice cream. I'm not asking stuff out of the ordinary. I'm asking, how did the window break objectively? What did you see? Every person should answer the same thing. That's known as objective. And why we could see it, because we could see every single object in the movie. We could see the horseshoe, we could see the glass, we could see, you know, Felix waving this horseshoe around, the horseshoe goes through the window and breaks it. Every person on earth should answer the same thing. Anyone who doesn't has a mental problem. What did this person answer? This is what he answered. Let me put this up here. He said, no one can objectively tell you what happened there, especially seeing as they're just cartoons. I couldn't believe his answer. So if I ask a 10-year-old, what are you seeing there, 10-year-old? What's happening there? And I think if I go to kindergarten, all the kids would say, well, Bugs Bunny jumped or dived, he dove into a rabbit hole. That's what they would say. That's what you're staring at. That's objectively what's there. But he says he can't tell me objectively what's there because it's a cartoon. That was his answer. I couldn't believe it. Okay, but you see what kind of people you're dealing with. Either they're making themselves hard to catch, or they don't want to be caught in their lies or in their contradictions. So they say even more dumb things like, I can't tell you because it's a cartoon. I can't tell you why the window broke. I can't tell you that, Bugs dove into his, his hole because it's a cartoon. And this is the problem with these people. Okay, so now someone comes to you, okay? Someone comes to you, he's a religious folk, someone from the traditional religions, and he says, I've got a theory of gravity. Oh, okay, what's your theory of gravity? It says here, I'm saying that angels mediate gravity. I say that angels carry astronauts to Earth. They angels that are here, they force the pin to fall, and so on. So I'm a little skeptical. I'd have to see it. Okay, I've illustrated it for you. Here it is. I'm going to show you. Okay, and so here he puts this up there for you, okay, so that you can verify what he's saying, the mechanism. And here you have the angel carrying the astronaut to Earth. He says that's how gravity works, according to me. And you might go in there and say, well, I don't believe in your theory. What experiments have you run? I don't believe in angels. I don't even believe in God, so, I think you're wrong. Have you done any experiment? What's the equation? Can you show me something? Wrong questions. Wrong questions. The person is saying, giving you a mechanism. He's telling you a mechanism of how he thinks, what he proposes of how gravity works. We're not asking you to believe in his theory. We're not asking you to, what's the evidence? How many people have voted for your theory? We don't care about any of that. We want to understand what's in his mind as far as what he proposes for the mechanism of gravity. And there he's showing, he's saying angels carry it down to Earth. And the question is, did you understand the mechanism that he's proposing? That's the question. And if you didn't understand it and you say, well, it's just a cartoon anyways. Well, then you got a problem. You got a mental problem. You got a mental problem because the question is, do you understand the mechanism that he's proposing? That's the question. That's what's before us. We're not talking about evidence. We're not talking about who believes in it. We're looking at the mechanism. Okay, so now there's another fellow. He comes up and he says, look, I've got a theory of gravity. Okay, what's your theory? Well, I say that all atoms in the universe are interconnected. And so every atom from the Earth is connected to the astronaut. And so as he approaches the Earth, the ropes, in this case, right, they fan out, all these elongated entities fan out, and he accelerates ever at a faster rate. So he goes faster, faster, faster. We call that acceleration, and that's the acceleration of gravity. Well, can you illustrate that mechanism for me? Yeah, sure. And here the fellow goes in there and he illustrates it for you. And he says, here it is. Okay? He didn't draw all the elongated objects there because it would be a gazillions. He just illustrated a few so that you can understand the mechanism of what is bringing the astronaut to Earth. Why he falls to Earth and not to outer space. Why? Because the Earth is very close by again and consistent with Newton's equation. So we're all safe there. Okay? So the fellow falls to Earth. The astronaut falls to Earth because every atom in his body is bound to every atom that comprises the Earth. That's the theory. Okay, and the question is, did you understand the theory? And the guy says, well, I don't believe in your theory. I don't see any ropes or anything, between any two atoms. I can't touch them. So where did you come up with this? And why can't I touch them? And so on, And so the issue is, did you understand the mechanism? That's the only question. The question, did you understand the mechanism? And the guy said, well, no, I don't understand because it's a cartoon. Okay, what are you going to do? The guy doesn't understand because it's a cartoon. We're asking him to understand why the window broke. He doesn't understand it because it's a cartoon. He doesn't understand why that bugs dove into his hole because, it's just a cartoon. He doesn't understand that the angel carried the astronaut to Earth because that's just a cartoon. And he doesn't understand the ropes because he says that's a cartoon. And so, we're talking about mechanisms here and he doesn't understand it. Yet he understood, probably, I think, the steam engine. And you say, why did you understand that? That was a cartoon too. Yeah, but that's real and I prove it and I've got evidence and everybody voted for it. So he believes on the basis of authority because that's a cartoon too. That was a drawing. And so this is the issue. The issue is people are confusing belief with objectivity, what we have in front of us. If I ask every person on earth, what did you just see? They should all say, any rational human being should say, the astronaut, every atom in his body was tied to every atom on Earth. And so he fell because, the ropes got closer to the Earth. Now, maybe they're elastic. We don't understand that yet. There are other problems. But the issue is they should be able to give you in general terms that the astronaut fell to Earth because every atom in his body is bound to every atom on Earth. He's tied to the Earth. That's the mechanism. Now, we can go into more detail later on, but the issue is we're talking about mechanisms here. Whether you understand the mechanism proposed. If you don't, well, we have to say a little more maybe so that you understand it better. But to say, well, I can't understand because it's a cartoon. Well, not very smart. And you say, well, where'd you get that anyways? I mean, where'd you come up with all this nonsense about, all atoms being interconnected and so on? Well, here it is. Okay, here's, for those who want proof and evidence, we don't deal with this in science, but here you have proof, evidence, authority, all the stuff that you always wanted. Okay, here you have Mr. Richard Muller, professor at Berkeley, says, so for example, if you have the Earth, there's a big mass here, and you have you with your little mass here, every atom on Earth is pulling on every atom of you. You're also pulling on it. The amazing thing about gravity is that it goes right through things. Okay? So yeah, if every atom of you is pulling on every atom on Earth, and vice versa, it means every atom of you is connected, physically connected to every atom on Earth, because otherwise you're introducing black magic. You're saying that one atom pulls on you, but there's no connection, no physical entity between you. That's what you're saying. Okay? So this is the issue. The issue is mechanism. And this person, this individual, apparently does not understand that. He thinks that science is about just math and authority and just believing in what the people in Cambridge and Oxford and Harvard and Caltech, just feed them. And hopefully not. Hopefully science is about, like what he did here, questioning the instructor or the theorist or whoever, question them. And the question is, did he ever question his instructors, his teachers, or what he read? Did he ever question that? Or did he just accept and say, well, black holes have been proven, so yeah, I'll accept that, and I'll accept dark matter, and I'll accept dark energy, and that a particle can be at two places at once, and blah, 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 blah. Why? Because it's being fed to him as proof and truth and fact. That's the only reason he believes in it. He has no argument. I mean, he could just as well raise the arguments he raised in my videos against those theories. Why did he ever do that? And I'm almost sure he did because, you find people like Joe Rogan and so on. They interview all these people, the celebrities of math, and they tell me, yeah, there's several universes and particles come out of nothing. And we have all these black holes and dark matter out there. And he never questioned it. It's like, oh, okay, that's nice, that's interesting. Then he brings another celebrity who tells him the same thing. And they'll just accept it and accept it and accept it and accept it. No one questions it. What do you mean, black hole? What do you mean that particles can come out of the void? What do you mean that a particle can be at two places at once? Nobody questions that. They just accept it because it comes through the channel of authority. That's what it's called.